What?
I said, are you okay?
Yes, absolutely. Super okay. Now, what was that comment? Oh,
You want to be close to us.
Not on the stage.
huh. Yeah, I wanted to get up close. There's something about you guys that is irresistible. I don't know what it is. Every week I go home and try to figure it out, but it just escapes me. In just a moment, I'm going to let you participate a little bit. The question I'm going to ask is exactly, what does prosperity mean to you? And I'm hoping I have a few responders. One of the things to make sure that I want to hear every word that you say, so I'm going to have artists take the live mic, and you're going to speak into that. Okay, now, in the 90s, I had to thank you, Malcolm. I love you. One of my adopted children. No, in the 90s, I sort of spent a lot of time going about the state doing prosperity seminars. But in the 70s, I went to all of them, especially if Earl Nightingale was in town and some of the guys that hung out with him, you know. I thought they were wonderful and had wonderful ideas. They didn't all connect with the spiritual principle I learned after I got into New Thought. And so that's the kind of thing that I teach, is more of that point of view. There are some people who naturally are so prosperous, and sometimes it's only in one area. I've met quite a number of people who had amassed a great fortune of money, but then, like one I remember in particular, I built their walls out on the lake, and their boat slipped and things. So it seemed like they were doing so well, and they were financially. But then a few years later, they called me to do some little bit of work, and I discovered that they had had this great dispute, and he was living in the lake. There was a little lake house that was out away, or guest house, I believe they called it, and then she had the big house. And when the children came to see them, well, they had to sort of see them separately, you know. But they didn't want to divorce because it involved so much detail about the money that they had amassed. But I thought, man, living like that, half of the joy is getting up in the morning and pestering Pat about something. Does anybody else understand that?
And so does she.
Oh, so does she? Well, anyway, I did something also in the 90s while all this was going on that made me sort of, it brought me to a point. I'm not sure I know as much about prosperity as I thought I did. I'll tell you the little story. I've wanted for several years that I've been talking to you people to tell you this story, but it never did seem to fit in with what I was doing. But today, I wanted to tell you about it. Pat and I were, this is back in the 90s also, and we were watching this thing on Channel 13, PBS, is that it? Something, whatever. Anyway, it was about Chichen Itza. And so they were showing all the ruins and things. And so I said, right now, I'd like to get on the phone and get a reservation and go down there and see those ruins. So because a lot of tours go out of Cancun, well, we got a room there. And then the bus that took us, the guy that was the tour guide had grown up there. And he and his sister had been the only ones that, in his knowledge, that had gotten a college education. And for a while, they taught in the school there. But then he went on to other things, and now he was the tour guide to take people to Chichen Itza. Okay, thank you. You may have to say it again for me. I don't think I can wrap my tongue around that one. But he had grown up in a little Mayan, descendants of Mayans, a village. And so he said, now this tour, we're going to do something that we've never done before. On our way to Chichen Itza, am I closer? I'm close enough. We're going to take another sort of tour away from there in order to go to this Mayan village. And he said, it's the one where I grew up and I taught, and he gave us great explanation. Well, we got there, and it was a very unusual place. It's in the Yucatan on the way between Cancun and... Thank you. All right. I got there, and not only was there a tour guide, but I believe it had to be every child in the village were walking along behind us. So I was more fascinated with them than with the sight. So I sort of dropped back and chatted with them a little bit in Spanish, and I would ask them questions like where I already knew the answer, because this very unusual or odd thing that was way up in the air, I finally figured out it was the water tower. So I asked that question to one of the kids, what is this up here, And so I knew the answer before I started. But then as we walked along, I'd ask other questions. And finally, the little girls were sort of in this group and the little boys, but they kept right. And they were having so much fun. I couldn't believe that just hanging out there with us, that was so much fun. They were laughing and going. But what I asked them was, I asked the little girls, I said, over there, and I said this in a tone where the boys could hear me too, which one of those guys over there is the strongest? And they all pointed to one guy, and he sort of did this. But anyway, the thing I noticed is that the houses were all round, and we asked about it, and he said that it's a matter of the chi, that, we don't have square corners. They don't have square corners because they don't want to block that. Well, let me get through all of that. I did notice that there was hardly any furniture, and mostly around, built out of blocks and things, and sort of a thatch-looking roof, real strange-looking roof. But the thing that I noticed was that the place was real clean, and a lady was sweeping, and there wasn't any grass. She was sweeping her yard with a broom, and I think she was really just watching us because there was nothing but dirt there. There wasn't any grass growing, not any concrete, just sweeping the dirt, But she had left her door knew that there was sort of hammocks that everybody slept on, and there wasn't much. But the thing that I noticed was that there was an air of happiness that you could not walk around without noticing it. There wasn't any way to miss that. There was sort of this joy. And the tour guide commented that I had already noticed and commented myself on people out gathering big boulders and putting them on a truck, picking them up with a backhoe or something that looked like a backhoe, putting them on a big truck. And he's saying, now that Cancun and all those places are developing, these are landscaping boulders that people, and they're getting paid to do that, and that has since Cancun came in 80, he told me what year, I've forgotten, but he said there's been a little bit of elevation of prosperity. But I thought the houses still don't have any furniture, but there the people had somehow found the answer to joy. And so I went back to prayer again saying, please God, give me a better definition than I've ever had about prosperity, because these people are experiencing what I'm trying to teach. They're experiencing it, and there doesn't seem to be enough money if you put it all together. They wouldn't have enough to do much, to say the least, because all the homes sort of looked alike, And it was also interesting to me because that idea of chi sort of came from the Orient or from Asia. And so it must have come across because they had the same exact definition that the people, like for example in China, would have. All right, now, here's what I learned. That I don't know as much about prosperity as I thought I did. I do know this, I don't know how I got there, but I really believe with all my heart that Pat and I are really experiencing prosperity because we're happy together. We have a roof over our head. Sometimes it changes from time to time. Excuse me. Did you see the dust flying? Now, because we lived in the dust for a while, I've still got a little bit of it here. I'm not sick. I'm just dusty. All right, what I want to know now that's going to add, now this is important that I hear what you say. So I've asked artists to come around with a microphone. So if anybody has a definition of what it means to you, David.
Prosperity means abundance. Materially, I have more than I need.
Mm-hmm.
Yet, what it really means is that God is always with me, guiding me, even when I'm not aware of it. So,
True
God
story.
is always with me and guiding me. That's for me true prosperity and abundance.
Okay. Here.
For me, prosperity has come because I get to watch God in action. The energy of God that presents to me before I could even think that I might need something. Or if a thought comes through my mind, it becomes manifest. Not on big money issues, but on simple things like, oh, I wish I had some color in my yard. And then within 5 minutes, Martha shows up in a pickup with 5 bags of calla lilies. So I didn't even express it. I'm just thinking, man, that needs a spot of color. And that's God in action. And it's not the stuff, it's just being awestruck at how things flow.
Hey, I was going to say that.
Go ahead.
No.
For me, I feel prosperity in privilege. I have been given the privilege to serve our clients completely. They're my peeps, and I've been given the privilege to take care of them in the ways that they need us.
Yes.
Prosperity to me is just a flow of energy. It's who we are in the body, that we give distinctions all the way through it, but it's just a flow of energy.
For me, prosperity means that it's all going to be okay. I make roughly the same amount of money, or don't make roughly the same amount of money as I always have. But I just know that everything's going to be okay. My health, my wealth, it'll all work out.
Here's somebody down here. Oh, here's either one. I didn't see your hand.
For me, prosperity is the freedom to live in wonder.
Okay, very good.
I guess I'm a little more prosaic than most of you, but I think of prosperity as freedom from worry. Worry about anything. Health, wealth, relationships, but freedom from worry for me is prosperity.
Okay. Now, thank you so much. Thank all of you. John, are we recording all this? See, next time, after you've had a little time to forget what you said, well, I'll play it back to you. See, but I'll take credit for it if you don't mind. I like to do that. All right, that portion which is yours. There's a scripture there's something about the story of the prodigal son. I know that I mentioned that, it seems like quite a bit. I've only done one, I think, message on that whole thing itself. But right in the beginning, there was something that was said. It said there was, and this is the story that Jesus is telling. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, "Father, give me my share of the estate." So he divided his property between them, the 2 sons. Okay? I like the King James because here's what it says. Father, give me the portion of goods that falleth to me. In other words, give me that portion which is mine. Now keep in mind in this story, Jesus is describing humankind in relationship to God. Do you see? The Father is unmistakably God in this story. But the question being is, why wasn't there any argument? Oh, in the book, in the Bible, the Method, that translation of the Bible, it says, and give it to me right now. In other words, he was in a hurry to take off to the far country, which simply is another expression for being separated from God. Not that you can do that, but if we have the experience to where we're not experiencing God, then there is that feeling within us of separation, and it's as powerful in directing our life as though we were in touch with Spirit. So, for really prosperity, and I believe that this includes everything that I've ever known about it, and Pat has already sort of mentioned this, but it's cultivating an intense relationship with Spirit, which is, by the way, our true nature. This, from the very beginning of creation, was what was intended for each of us to be so in touch spiritually that the world looked like it was all ours. There is a feeling that develops when we have a strong spiritual relationship. There is that feeling that starts within us that we have everything, that the portion never ends, that we don't have to take it all right then because it's just going to go along forever as long as we live. That's the feeling that is created by a strong spiritual relationship. When we're meditating, when we spend time in prayer, I feel like it's important. Showing up in church. If I'm not having an experience of ministry, I want to tell you, I find someplace and I show up every Sunday because it's so important that it's like food. I don't want to leave off a meal. 3 times a day. You can tell. But it's like that nourishment, that something about being here with you guys that does something for me that is just critical to my well-being and to that expanded feeling of having everything, having more than that portion that belongs to me. I feel like that out in the storage building, I've got stuff that should belong to somebody else. Yeah. You know? I mean, we can't find room to put all the things. But through prayer, through meditation, and through this relationship, part of it, and I nearly hate to describe it as this, because if you came up in fundamentalism, it doesn't probably mean the same thing, or it strikes some kind of little note. Because what is really happening is that you are getting in touch with the real you. When you mix that, you're finding that there is a reality of you that is different than the physical body walking around. Is that right? In other words, that is what you begin to discover when it's a real spiritual experience. And that you also discover that there's a lot more to you than shows up. That's what's so fascinating, because that means that we can spend the rest of our life exploring all of the very facets of who we are exactly. One of the things we discover that I think is so important is that there is a flow and it's a spiritual flow, and that is like a place to live. It's where what you're doing, you're not going to get everything perfect. That would be a disaster. I'm so glad that none of you are walking around perfect, glowing. I don't. Do you see what I mean? That we are loved, all of this spiritual energy. We are so loved that it doesn't matter what the flaw is or where we stumble, but in that flow we keep getting back up, don't we? Now, there is another scripture that I want to talk about. And it's got two parts, but it has to do with that portion that belongs to you. And this is from Psalms 37. It's the second verse. Delight yourself. There's two parts to this, delight and desire. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Well, think about that one a little bit, because it has two parts, and the one part goes back to what we were already talking about. Because as Pat mentioned, it's not the stuff that shows up in your life. It's watching how it happened. Since we remodel houses from time to time, the one thing we don't do is look for them. That didn't work for us. What did work is praying about them and opening up and expressing that this is what I desire right now, and then leaving the rest of it to Spirit, and somehow or other you just walk up and it shows up. And I don't know how, I can't really tell you how it all works, but it's working in our life, and each thing provides the money that we have needed to do whatever we need to do. And it's not as though we have what somebody else, probably half of you here could buy and sell me, or more than half probably, but it's not that it's that much wealth, but it feels like it. It has the feeling of wealth, which the feeling of wealth attracts more of various kinds of wealth. Just that feeling that comes up. What we do, we get a phone call. We go visit David and Terry and walk out in the front yard and see a sign, there's an estate sale, and then they're wanting to sell that house. Okay, so that's how it shows up. So we make an offer and we say in our prayers, okay, Spirit, if this is not ours, we don't want it. If it's ours, we'll take it. Do you see? But there is a way to live. And I know there are people who are brilliant financially and that really probably ignore this, but they're actually reaching down into the same power that is there. Because there is the power, the spiritual power is what it is. But it's there within everybody to reach levels that we never dreamed of. And the thing is cultivating them. Being able to take the knowledge first that it's there. And going from there. You see my little cloud of dust? But going from there. So here's my thing that I'm going to leave with you is this. I think that one of the greatest things you can do, since that power is within you, is to use it and live a life that is such a remarkable example for other people. You don't have to go, it's not like standing on the corner handing out tracts, because there are people who do that. And it's fine, I don't have any objection to it because I already know what they say because I've read some of them. But the idea being, just being who you are spiritually and discovering all of this and working in this thought. This is what works to make life beautiful and to touch lives. There are lives that you can touch that no one else can influence. And maybe you don't have to say a lot what you do, you just demonstrate life working. And people will say, do you know what? If that guy can do it, I believe I can do it. Do you see? So, my prayer for you is that all of that portion which belongs to you shows up in your life. Thank you.